And so, like, to me, this just makes a lot of sense that you would use it all over the place when you're exactly using code that you don't want to touch everything or figure out all of it to some degree, or you don't have access to it. Or, like, you potentially break things.
Yeah, who else has an example of using adapter? That was a good one, Tyler.
One of the... Oh, are you just thinking words of affirmation now? Now that we're all aware of that?
That was a good one.
Yeah.
It was.
I wasn't... Yeah, I was not claiming... I wasn't claiming anything that was insincere just for that. Like,
I think what Josh is saying is he's thinking about it because Tyler's words of affirmation, you gave him a compliment. I think that's what he's saying.
Yes, I am that clever. Okay, I did go. Oh, this will really work. But it's generous.
It can certainly be both. It wasn't an accusation or anything.
It was a good example.
No, it's
the same as someone giving me a hug and knowing that I like hugs. Like I know it's not like how dare you or you manipulate.
Okay, I think we can all
know that I love this.
Adapters.
How dare you?
Adapters.
Thank you for the compliment. I'll take it as a compliment and leave it as that.
But
you go.
Okay, so what I was thinking of, and one of the things that they said which stood out and makes sense, is that you can use it in combination with the factory method. And so that was something that I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And I think back to the example of, hey, we have an API for achievements. We have this achievement API for Steam and for Epic and for GOG and for the Switch. Does Switch have achievements? I forget. And for...
No, they don't.
Never mind. Well, then it's an empty class that does absolutely nothing. And for why am I forgetting? It's PlayStation and Xbox and all that. And so I'm like, that makes sense, having an adapter in the middle so that it's just get achievement, and then we feel smart.
Actually, I will say that's an adapter's probably not the right thing there for the example that you gave, because bridge is.
And we'll interesting.
We can get to that for bridge.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess that bridge, I could be mistaken, but the thing is that
maybe let's talk about that when we get there.
Yeah, because it seems like you need some sort of adapter.
Adapter's one-to-one. Okay, so if you have the Steam achievement DLL, I'll call it, right, whatever that API happens to be, and you create an adapter next to it, it's one-to-one. It doesn't help you with GOG. It doesn't help you with anything, right? Okay. So
you might be using an adapter with a bridge. Is that like maybe what you're saying? Adapter for the DLL and then a bridge to connect to your adapter in your.
Not sure. Maybe with bridge. You have a bridge and then you have a bunch of adapters.
Yeah, I think I see what you're saying. So with the adapter, like they use the example of remote controls for different items. Like you have one remote for
that's
one
bridge.
TV. Oh, that's bridge.
Yeah.
Which is why I said it. Okay, other examples of adapter that you've used
that are good.
I'm trying to think of
examples that are good.
Like Tyler's.
What are you trying to say, Michael?
The common examples of adapter are all about like working with external code that you don't have access to. I'm trying to think of a good case for where it would make sense, like when you do have access to a code.
I think they mentioned about code that you don't want to change. So I can imagine like some sort of really like interconnected mess.
That's all code.
So the example they gave was some sort of monolithic like something, and you didn't necessarily want to go in and change things, but you did want to, change how it links in. I need to look it up exactly the example they gave, but from memory there was changing it would be more difficult than just putting a wrapper around it, and I would need to look at the exact example to remember what that was.
I think we've established that's a bad idea, but we did sort of do this with character and battle. So we create like a battle object which has a character inside of it.
Not a good example.
But it is sort of like we're trying to use here's this character inside of a new context. And I don't think it made sense to do it that way, but I think it is an adapter, essentially.
Yeah, and the example they gave on the Guru place was like converting between XML and JSON.
Yeah.
Right, like if you throw an analyzing like library or something that is like only works on JSON, but all your data for your entire project is in XML. Like it's just only in XML and JSON, then to rewrite the JSON library to fit XML in that sense.
I had an example that I thought of from my experience where I realized, oh, we should have used an adapter. Was with Cinemachine. With on the Scout, we had some customizations that we wanted to make to it. And so we ended up with a situation where we made changes to the Cinemachine script because we had, for whatever reason, because they fixed bugs or whatever, we wanted to update it. So then we had this huge headache of like, well, we want to keep our changes, but we want the updated package. So you update the package, but then you have to like remember what your changes were and then go and reapply them every time you update the package.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, we probably should have made an adapter. If we had subclassed it, then we could have put our changes in and updated the package and not had to change anything.
Since someone keeps on saying bridge, I'm just going to say decorator. I think that's a decorator, Barabo.
They did say that there's similarities between decorator and bridge. I honestly feel like that's one of the most confusing things about the patterns is how similar a lot of them are. I'm like, well, they talk about that it's not necessarily about the class hierarchy or structure, but about the idea, the reason behind why you're doing it, and that's what makes it the structure.
So there's a lot of tools in the tool belt upstairs. For instance, I have pliers, and then I have needle nose pliers, and then I have plumbing plier. So, and all of them can be used as a hammer in a pinch. So yes, yes, the patterns are like, isn't this just the same as this? No, it's nuanced, right? Like it's a needle nose plier as opposed to a regular pliers. It's got to know them all and know which one to do.
Yeah, I feel like hammers are probably, you can get a bit more out of that because sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between hammers. Whereas I feel like most people can look at pliers and needle nose pliers and be like, oh yeah, those are different. Okay, they've got the sort of same thing, but that one's clearly different. Whereas sometimes like with hammers and stuff, you can't tell.
Yeah, I guess when I think of decorator, I think of like adding functionality. And I guess in my example, it was more like changing what is there to fit our code. So that's why I was thinking of that as adapter specifically, because it's adapting their script to our code in a way that would allow us to update it.
Modifying the core stuff you were actually trying to customize, not just readapt. But
yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of an adapter as a way to like intercept some calls and do something else. Like that's actually a really clever strategy.
I mean, like in the real world, what like charging adapters we use all the time. Like that's in my mind not really all that different than programming design idea of the adapter. And like a decorator, I would think of you're splicing something into the line, like electrical lines, kind of like you're decorating that line on top of that. And so in the real world aspect of those terms, like it makes sense that there's a difference in that degree. But sometimes in the pattern of just looking at the pseudocode, it's not that easy to always see.
Something that Josh used the adapter for was, Michael said, like, isn't it like all external APIs? And the answer is pretty much. If you're using an external API directly, you're probably doing it wrong, right? Cinemachine, and Josh put in analytics, and so we want to record an event. This is an event that we care about. The fact that it calls a Unity Analytics or a Google Analytics, or like, I don't care, right? And there's only one. This is, again, the fact that adapter is one. We have analytic events that occur within our code. It goes to the analytic adapter, and we've chosen at compile time that we're going to Google Analytics or Flurry or whatever else, right? Like, and that's not going to change at runtime. Bridge is where you can have multiples of these things and you can swap around, right? So it's very much that. I have the same situation, so just in general, with credit card processing. So I've connected to, I don't know, 4 different credit card processing companies over the years. They're all roughly the same, and they all have the exact same parameters, because you need a number, and you need a name, and you need some kind of transaction ID. Like, they have all the same parameters, and none of them are in the same order. So it's like, we're Royal Bank, and we do it this way, and we're TD, and we do it that way, and so what do you need? You need an adapter, right? So your credit card or your checkout logic is like, here's the stuff, and then when the company's like, hey, we don't want to use RBC anymore, we want to use TD, fine. Just swap out the one for the other and put the parameters in the order that they want them, and I'm done, right? And the main checkout logic, it doesn't care, it doesn't know, or whatever, right? So, and then going into Archmage, so the analytics is an example, but Master Audio. Master Audio is really easy to call from anywhere at all times because it has this singleton static class that you can just call or whatever, but I don't want to be tied to Master Audio, so we should have an audio thing. I believe we do. We have this audio thing which then calls Master Audio, and a lot of the time they're kind of pass-through-y type things, but that's what technical architecture is preparing for these eventualities in the future. It's the 15 more minutes of work today to save me 15 days later if we're going to change how we're doing audio. And if you're like, well, why would we change audio? Because James is really keen on Wise. That's why we might change it. And if you have master audio calls all throughout your thing, and for some reason James convinces me that Wise is worth the $16,000 in order to license it, then it's like, okay, fine, James, I give up. We're going to get Wise. And then who wants to be the guy going through all the code, changing all the master audio calls? I can tell you I don't want to be that guy, right? And so technical architecture is thinking about, is this something that could change? Is this something that could change? I'm not even getting into the likely to change, but is this something that could change? An adapter gives me the option later to change it. Otherwise, it's master audio calls throughout like 1,000 source code files, right? And so that's why you want to use the adapter.
Just wondering on that though, like how do you, because I'm thinking about that and like...
Ask an experienced person, that's the answer.
Well, no, what I mean is like, master audio is simpler to use than Wise, right? So in some places where we're calling the adapter for master audio, we're not going to want, you know, we might use the same call, but we want 2 different behaviors from Wise. Is that possible? That's kind of what's going through my head at the moment. Because we had sort of imagined using it a certain way, which was linked to...
Do you mean we might have additional data that we would need to or want to pass?
So if the new thing has new things,
yeah,
adapter doesn't save you anything, but
okay.
It also doesn't harm you.
Right. Okay, yeah, I see what you're saying.
So
yeah.
if the new thing has the new thing, then you're like, cool. You know, you get the adapter call, and maybe from there, then you split it out, and you call Wise, and then you call Wise again. Or back at the client level, they have the original call to the adapter, and you have to add an additional call to the adapter for the new whatever it happens to be. So now, sound systems, from what I've seen, work similarly. So you have sound groups, and you tell them to fire off which sound group. Doesn't matter if it's master audio or it's Wise. A lot of the difference is on what James can do.
Right.
When the sound group is fired, right? Because most of the time with sound, you're just firing an event. Hey, this is the event. Player entered town, right? This is the event. And then James can go and hook up all these things, and you can have all these layers and things ducking and doing like all this complicated stuff. And what do we do on the code side? Hey, event. This is the event. Fire.
Yeah. Okay, I think I get it now. That was what you're saying. Especially like, it gains you a lot and doesn't cost you anything. Essentially, yeah.
It feels really dumb, right, Josh?
You mean as far as like how simple it is or basic?
The analytics. You're working on the analytics, and you're like, all I'm doing is calling into my thing and then making one call out. Like,
yeah, I mean, so the struggle was that I didn't really know who we were going to be using it at the end, so I didn't feel like I had enough data to make smart decisions in the middle. That was why I struggled with that.
One thing I guess is Sean's question though is like with the adapter pattern, you're essentially saying, here's our API. Here's what we're going to call into. We're defining this interface.
Yep.
We don't care what the functionality the actual thing is doing. We're just saying, here's what we're supporting. And so if you get something else that can do more, you still have to go back and change your interface if you want to use that new stuff. But you're always going to have to do that. If you're going to add more stuff, you're always going to have to add that in.
I suppose as well, you get the advantage of if it does less, you don't have to go through and change everything because you just have empty method calls or whatever. You know, like if it downgrades, you know, like, do you understand what I'm saying, or have I confused you?
I mean, yes, you just don't want to downgrade. You want to swap to a
No.
different product.
But like, say, you know, like for instance, you can't use it on mobile or whatever because, you know, too many CPU cycles or whatever. So, I don't know, I can see the value of it now a lot better. So.
Yeah, so the rule of thumb is if you're using an external thing, and that thing can be an asset, you know, a system, whether it's Cinemachine or analytics or something, generally you want an adapter. You rarely, very rarely, you would want to call something directly.
And, well, it's not technically an adapter. I think our tag sort of set up for like embedding stuff into text or whatever. So you're like, hey, let's make this a certain color. Sort of feel like it's doing the same sort of thing. It's not technically an adapter in how it's set up. But like we could easily go through and say, hey, we're going to use a different system on TextMesh Pro has a new syntax, or the new UI system has a new syntax, and you just swap out what you're doing. So you still call tag.goal with this text.
So on that, like, I feel like we have a lot of like direct calls to TextMesh Pro stuff. Should we not be doing that? Is there a way around that I haven't thought about?
There's no other option. So,
okay.
Like, that's in the, you know, is this something that could change? I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
It has changed.
It did.
We went from TextMesh Pro old version to TextMesh Pro new version and broke everything.
I think that why that parlay is a bit more convoluted is because we're calling a lot of assets that are within Unity. So we're directly accessing those. So that seems to be a question of, do we create in-betweens from us to assets within Unity? And that doesn't seem to make sense for our goals. Like, we're not looking to switch to Unreal, at least at this point, or anything like that.
Can't switch to Unreal with C#.
If we did, I mean, honestly, the bigger problem that I would say in our code is not that, like, the place in my mind where the decoupling happens is that you have something that controls the UI and then something else that calls the UI. And that's where I think the decoupling would happen, not that we have something that is an additional in-between, or that is a, like, special UI handler in the middle. It's
right.
That we're calling a different, I guess, display.
I think if you're going through the mental check of should this be an adapter or not, then the first question is there a valid second option, right? So with Master Audio, there's Wise. With the analytics, there's Unity Analytics, or there's Google Analytics, right? And so, you know, the likelihood of moving off of Unity Analytics is like ridiculously low, but it is a valid second option. But in the case of TextMesh Pro, is there a valid second option? No, custom write your own, I guess. Like,
we were just watching about this yesterday, though. The new UI toolkit is going to be different. And maybe it still has TextMesh Pro in it, but I don't think that's a guarantee. I think it might be going in a different direction.
But at the time we started using TextMesh Pro, was there a second valid option? No.
There was Unity's built-in text, which was different, but it was not.
Not valid.
But that's
not a valid option.
That's a really
That's an option.
question.
That's a valid option.
If the option's awful, then I don't consider it.
That's a really good question, though, because, I mean, like, there's probably a lot of times in the length of Archmage. Now, hopefully we don't work on another game for 8 years, but...
Yeah, 10 would be the new goal.
Gotta keep, exceeding.
What? Like...
Thomas, my goal is just to finish Archmage before 10 years. I don't believe in this 8-year cycle.
Yeah.
Do we need to be thinking, like, especially like if you start something, you know, like in a year in, there's like a way better system released. Like, I can see that happening, you know. Do we need to be thinking about adapters even though there may not be a valid option that we know about, you know?
No.
I'm still with Josh on this one. Like, so whether TextMesh Pro changes or not, the larger piece is actually the Unity side of it.
Yeah.
So it's like the TextMesh Pro and how we're doing prefabs, or like there's all this other stuff.
Yeah.
Where TextMesh Pro is just a small part of it.
Yeah.
Where I would want to abstract at the higher level of, hey, we need this data that we need to push down to Unity.
Yeah.
And maybe we're not coupled to Unity anymore. So we're not manually calling get component. We're working with some other interface, like our scene class or whatever. Like, so we, splitting it apart that way makes sense. Splitting it apart
Yeah.
down that level, it's like, well, maybe we're going to change that. And then you do. You can change that in the interface level, or the GUI level.
Yeah.
And you can change the functionality level, but you don't need to... Yeah, I don't see much value in changing Text Mesh Pro.
Yeah.
Wasn't it that granular?
I would think that if you have a lot of adapters that are just strewn about that are ultimately connecting to the same system, you need to move the adapter level up, not
Right.
like because then it's like, oh, we have a Text Mesh Pro adapter. Well, do we also need to have a component adapter? Do we also need to have, and it just becomes a big mess.
Yeah, and you're saying like that now becomes the Unity adapter.
Yeah, like it's. I don't think that we should have a Unity.
No,
adapter.
but in this
Clear, I'm not
hypothetical
recommending
example.
that.
Yeah.
This may be completely unnecessary Archmage code history, but I'll share it anyway. So I first prototyped Archmage in Windows Forms. Why would I use Windows Forms? Because I was really fast at it. That's whenever you're prototyping anything, what tool should you use? The one you're fastest at. That's the answer. Like, it's a prototype. It doesn't matter like shipping or, you know, is this the best tool? You figure out later what the best tool is. So I made this thing in Windows Forms, and I had all these classes, you know, game class and player class and whatever, spell class, spell casting, whatever. So I had all these things. And then I was like, oh, maybe I should use Unity to actually make this thing, because nobody's going to want to buy this thing as Windows Forms on Steam. That would really stand out. That probably would get a lot of press. This is a game on Steam. And so I was like, okay, well, I already have this working prototype code base, whatever, and then I have this thing in Unity. And so for a long time, it was important to me to be able to run the prototype and run the Unity thing. And so what did I do? I used an adapter. So when I wanted to load a scene, then the adapter would figure out like, oh, am I being run by Windows Forms? Yep, so I will call a new form that way, or I'm in Unity, okay, fine, then I open up a scene in this way. And so I could run the game through both of these things. I'm not saying that's a great thing to do. Obviously, I abandoned that. The game doesn't run anymore on Windows Forms.
We're not leaving that as backwards compatibility is for players who are computers can't run Unity games.
So I am bringing it up as a the power of the adapter, because how hard is that to do? Like if you don't have the adapter and like suddenly, you know, hey, I want to run this through two entirely different game development processes that share one thing, a language. That's all they share. And it was possible, and I was able to do it because of the adapter.
And I would actually say in general, I do want that sort of decoupling.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to, when I'm working with Unity stuff, to have to like then go change my core logic. Like I don't want those intermingled. And so whether you call that the adapter pattern or you do something more like MVC or whatever, I want that separation so that I can swap out the thing. And maybe we're testing combat, we need to go quickly, and we just want to work with like a text interface. Like you just have a text window going up and down, and you don't care about anything else. Great, we can whip one of those up in a couple days, and there you have a complete system, rather than the long time it would take to get all the animations and stuff working for a full-fledged version. Like I much prefer keeping that separate, and in Archmage it's not as separate as I like anymore. But
Anymore, like it was before you started?
Yeah.
I mean, Thomas is talking about you can swap between Unity and
Right.
Forms. It had to be at least somewhat separate.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, a lot of the time, that's why you don't see in the code-based model behaviors being used for anything other than Unity stuff, right? So we'll have a class of character and we'll have a class of spell or whatever that is not a mono behavior. It is its own thing, and then there happens to be a mono behavior for spell, for showing it on the UI and taking click things and stuff, right? That just never be attached to your game engine. That's the answer.
Not that there are many other game engines we could take C# to anyway.
Wow, Windows Forms, there you go.
Good.
You can still compile the C# stuff, Josh, and you could then link into it from another language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Would be a bit more of a hassle, and I don't know if we would, but we could.
Isn't Game Maker C# too?
No, it's
Game Maker has their own language.
Game Maker script.
I thought they were back end though C#.
They might have been. I think
They were back in C++.
Oh, plus plus? Okay.
Unless they rewrote the entire thing. I don't know if they rewrote the entire
I think
thing.
they did.
Back when I was doing Game Maker and Game Maker script, it was C++ backend. It was a professor in Holland that created this thing to teach his students how to make games.
Really?
Yeah.
There you go.
And it just kind of grew. Like he did a really good base job, and he just kind of grew. And he didn't really know what to do with it, so he licensed it to somebody else to take care of all the sales and marketing for it, and send him royalty checks. Is basically what happened.
Yo-Yo Games became the owner.
Yeah, Yo-Yo Games. That's right.
I remember that whole thing. Game Maker 7.
Man, I wish I had Game Maker when I was 16 years old.
I'm glad I had it when I was 9. It was very nice.
Yeah. Okay.
Interesting. So okay.
We know what adapter
Just
is?
yeah, adapter I know. It's interesting is that the backend runtime is in C++, but the IDE is in C#.
Okay.
There you
So
go.
they made a new IDE. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're all right.
We're all correct here.
That's good.
Isn't that Unity too? C++, but like.
I think it's C++ all the way through.
I think so.
Oh, right. Okay.
Okay, so Bridge. What would you use Bridge for?
I don't know it's true anymore. They're
Bridges.
more
Achievements.
actually.
What was it? Achievements?
No, it doesn't matter.
Achievements. I wonder where I got that idea from.
Yeah, exactly.
The achievement one doesn't make as much sense to me because from what I was reading, it's like Bridge is when you have both sides of it that would vary. Like you'd have different hierarchies, and I don't see how the achievement one side of the bridge would vary. I can see how like it would vary on the other side where it'd be like different APIs to different systems. But would we ever like subclass our achievement library and do that different ways on our side?
So, I'm shocked to find out Switch doesn't have achievements. And I've only played 2 games on the Switch, really. Breath of the Wild and the Three Houses. Fire Emblem Three Houses. So, I never noticed that there weren't any achievements. I generally don't achieve anything when I play games. That's not true. So my first thought is that you would, regardless of what platform you're on, you want your own internal kind of achievement thing to show up or whatever, and then call out the external platform one. So that would be one call in of, hey, you have this achievement, and 2 calls that go out, one to show something in game and the other to the platform.
I mean, that part makes sense, I guess. But when I'm thinking about like the example on
Yeah,
the refactoring
hierarchies.
guru, where it's like multiple remotes and multiple TVs, radios, whatever. I don't know what the analogy for that is for the achievement system on our side. I just see like we're making an achievement call, and then that call gets routed through something that then calls different APIs. So I don't see how. I guess I'm having trouble visualizing like how both sides vary on that.
Yeah, because I would have thought the
They
vision.
would. The client side, the caller side, like wouldn't vary, right? So that is a difference from the example that he gave of colors and shapes, right? So you have these 2 hierarchies that are both doing their own thing, but they somehow need to connect to each other for variations, and so.
So is the difference between adapter and bridge that like an adapter is sort of pretty much static at compile time, or sort of like you have a setting somewhere but you set at some point to say, hey, I'm on switch or I'm on this. Whereas the bridge is more, you can swap in and out more frequently. So like you can use it with this one, then you can use it with this one because context has changed, or like I guess I'm not certain why achievement still isn't just an adapter.
Yeah, I agree. The more we talk about achievements, I understand less why the bridge is necessary.
Okay, well, because I was thinking that you decide on what credit card processor you're going to have, and that's the only one that's in the code base. Whereas in a multi-platform situation, I'm calling the Nintendo Switch one and the GOG one and the Steam one or whatever, and they're all part of this code base. And it could be at compile time that I'm looking at the platform thing in the build script, and so it's like, oh, okay, this is the one that I'm picking. So it is happening at compile time, because why would you call the Steam achievement and the Xbox achievement, right? Like you wouldn't do multiple calls, but they're part of the code base. So that's not a runtime change, obviously. It's still compile time.
So I guess the question with the adapter then is the idea that with the adapter it is not adjustable. What you are using, it is hard coded. So then you would change. It's adjustable by the programmer, but
not runtime.
adapter is never something that you would change during runtime or even during compile time. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. I was imagining you could change it at compile time.
Yeah,
because then that makes more sense.
I was thinking the analogy, the travel analogy, like Tyler made, where like, oh, I'm in New Zealand now. I use this adapter. It's like, oh, now we've moved over to the States, so we use that adapter. Like, that's what I was thinking, that you just swap adapters in and out as you need it.
Yeah. So I think the big difference though is the in the way that it's implemented is that I think maybe Josh, you were saying this, is the adapter is concrete in the fact that it's like you have the iOS achievement adapter, you have the Steam achievement adapter, you have the Linux achievement adapter, right? And then if you have to, at some point when you're calling the achievement, you have to figure out, okay, I want the Steam one because I'm on Steam. I want the iOS one because I'm on iOS. Yeah. So then your achievement systems internally are like trying to figure out, okay, what's my platform, and then I'll call the right adapter. But if you're doing it for achievements, but whereas the bridge I'd see is like you're just calling the bridge, hey, bridge guy, like my bridge achievements, whatever you can name the class, I want to achieve this one accomplishment, and now it goes and figures out the platform itself. And because all the methods are the same, then internally our clients or whoever are asking doesn't care what the platform is, so to speak. The bridge is deciding that and swapping in and out the platform that we're looking at.
I didn't have the impression that the bridge swapped out what it was using. I mean, there's like there are some of the other creational patterns that would do that.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's like, because it's an abstraction, like if you think of the remote in TV, it's an abstraction of a remote, right? So it doesn't matter which remote we have. If all the remotes have the same basic functionality of like increase volume, decrease volume, power on, power off, then it doesn't matter if it's an Apple TV remote or some other remote. If we just ask the bridge, hey, power up, then whatever the remote is, because the remotes are all just this type of a remote, then they work fine. Or if the remote is saying do something like power up the TV or the device, then it's more abstracted to that. So in a sense, it allows us to have any of these things without changing our code base or actually knowing what our database is in our internal code. That makes sense.
The one thing you said earlier about that you would call an adapter for Steam and call an adapter for Xbox, the whole point of the adapter is that you don't do that. You have an adapter achievement, and then that adapter has been compiled to call the Xbox or the Steam one at compile time. So it's like, I don't know, a switch statement based on, or it would actually be subclassed or whatever, but like you have the one input coming in, and then you would have your adapter for each one of those different platforms. And those platforms are going to look different in implementation, right? Just like the credit card companies all look different for their implementation. They're doing roughly the same thing, but it's a one call in, and you're just trying to route it the way that they want the data. There's maybe things you have to pull in additionally, and for Steam that you don't have to do for Xbox. So the adapter is that one-to-one way across. The bridge is definitely for you have two hierarchies that are potentially changing in different ways. Right? He has multiple GUIs on multiple platforms. So it's like Michael's example, hey, I want an ASCII or ANSI GUI for my combat, so it goes faster. And so that would be the bridge, because we want multiples on the client side and multiples on the implementation.
An example, I don't know if it's helpful to transition into this, but an example that I could think of for bridge is, and I think this would be correct, is you have it so that you have your controller, which is part of the bridge, but so, hey, is it keyboard input, is it gamepad input, etc., and then you have your window that you're adjusting because you'd have different windows. And so you're always going to have some sort of window and some sort of controller, but the window will change, the controller will change. You need to make sure that they're hooked together, so that and that you have common methods for each of them, so that you can say, hey, on this kind of input, whether going up or going left, right, then we call this method, but the method will do something different. For this UI, it might mean that you're moving a character around. For this UI, it might mean that you are moving around buttons. For this UI, it might mean that you're selecting different items, or that sort of thing. Is that
I think that's perfect.
Yay!
Yeah, I think you finally found an example of using bridge in games, because I couldn't come up with one. But yeah, you're right. There's all these different input controllers, and so I want to be able to use, I don't know, VR handset
joystick
thing or whatever. Yes, an actual joystick. I want my Thrustmaster with a throttle control on the side.
Yep.
I want to use a Playdate to play this game.
The which?
The Playdate.
I want to use a Wii
crank.
Oh yes, the crank. Yeah. How could I forget the crank?
Wii Motion Plus support.
Yeah.
I want an Ada keyboard.
So yeah, you're right. I think that's the quintessential perfect example of a bridge. That's where you use bridge in games, is for the input mechanisms, because there's so many of those that can happen, and then what they do, there's a bunch of ways that could go as well.
I think that might kind of fit in what they were saying too about like how you can sometimes use abstract factory kind of like in relation to it, because you have those like paired families of things. You know, like if you wanted to use an Xbox controller and then have GUI that shows Xbox style buttons and that kind of thing, it seems like that could be like part of the bridge, but then also the creational part of it could be with the abstract factory.
Yeah. And I understand that better after having read Abstract Factory on Refactoring Guru. So I definitely recommend Refactoring Guru.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah. I was able to understand these way faster, even though I got some things wrong than with the books.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point of discussion. I was reading the bridge thing, and the only thing I could think of was the achievement system. You guys have proven that that's actually not the case. But the input system is a great example.
Or we can go back to the patterns book and just say, hey, everything can work with mazes. So there we go.
Well, the mazes in the book is only for recreational patterns.
Okay.
They don't extend it.
Yeah,
that's fair.
But yes.
Okay, anything else?
I guess the interesting thing about the bridge, I was just rereading it here. Like, I feel like you use this all the time, really. Whenever you have like a class that contains another class, you're often using that. Like, so the example they gave is like colors and shapes. Like, so I feel like it's another one of those patterns that you use all the time without really thinking about. Like,
Are you talking about just the composition side of it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is what it says here as the pattern. And like the example it gave up here is the color, that the shape contains a color and you can swap out the color.
So I don't think object composition means you're doing the bridge. I just think object composition is object composition, and that's littered throughout Unity. Like, that was the initial insight or whatever. It was like, we should do this as object composition. And if you talk to Ryan about his game engine that he wrote, it's all based on object composition. So if you want something to react to the controller going right, that's a different object that you chuck on and is listening for the controller going right.
Right.
This may infuriate Josh, but like I think 10 of the patterns are all just that. And like there are several of these related patterns where it's like, you might think of this as the strategy pattern, you might think this is the decorator pattern. And the class diagrams do look the same, we admit that. But the intent on why you're doing it is different and how you're doing it.
Okay, now I definitely need some help. So if this is, like, if object composition isn't important to the bridge, I'm so confused.
Object composition is important to the bridge.
Yes.
Okay.
If you're doing object composition, that doesn't mean you're using bridge.
Right. Right.
Object composition is its own thing.
Right.
That'd be
And
like
that's-
saying inheritance is important to
Yeah.
a bridge. Like, it is.
Oh, right.
But it's
Right.
not like other patterns are going to use that in your game. But this one uses inheritance too. We should call it a different, or we shouldn't call it a different thing.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I think. Okay. I get it. Yeah. Yeah. I'm happier now.
Okay. Then we'll call that a wrap, and next time we will do, what are the next two?
Composite and decorator?
Okay, composite and decorator.
All right.
Perfect.
Tyler's
Next Friday.
already familiar with decorator.
Yeah. Good work, Tyler.
He'll have all the examples next time.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, see ya.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye.